everyone. Welcome back to the STEERus Weekly Grind virtual coffee chat. Thank you so much, Danielle Farage. So you're a growth marketing expert and part of Cafe, building communities. I know you're also tied into Upstream and all kinds of other groups. So thank you for that and being on the STEERus Weekly Grind show today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, we'll just, I guess, kind of dive in. Maybe, the question that everybody always asks, right? Who are you? What do you do? But let's turn it on its head a little bit and say, what are you going to do differently in 2022 to realize the kinds of goals and aspirations and things that you have and that you're working towards, but that you want to see, that you'd be toasting with champagne at the end of the year?
Yeah, I love that question. I love the alternative take on it because anyone can go to my LinkedIn profile and read a little bit about me. I probably won't tell you much beyond what's on there anyway. But I went into this year kind of with the overall understanding that we need to envision the life that we want to create for ourselves. And for me, I've been vision boarding since 2019. And that vision board, you can imagine, for 2020 seemed to be very interesting in the end, and different. But I think that this year I'm focusing instead of goals on vision boarding and also like kind of major themes. So the two major themes for me this year are confidence and focus or consistency. And really what that means is, I'm involved in a lot of different things. I have my foot in a lot of different communities and things that I'm working on. And I think that, persistence and focus is everything. And when you're young and when you're creative like me, it's really hard.
Mhm.
It's really easy to get distracted. It's really easy to say, oh, that looks shiny. I want to try that. So I think this year I'm really narrowing in and focusing on, my work, elevating consciousness around the intersection of identity, culture, and workplace. What does it mean to really create workplaces that people can feel comfortable coming to and being themselves, and also bringing themselves? And then on the flip side, writing a book about values-based job seeking. How do you really find and identify a place that does allow you to come and add your experience and who you are to the culture versus trying to silence that or mute that?
And maybe we can jump in there because I think it'll be really important for your book as well as for the audience members. Can you, as a job candidate, when you're going through the process of being interviewed and trying to select and work for that company, is there really enough time to figure out if you're going to have that opportunity to really release your true identity and have a culture and in a workplace that's going to work for you? Maybe talk to us about that and the expectations, how it shifts once you actually get there.
Yeah, I think, I've identified a really big disconnect, even when I was in college. Like the reason that I studied social sciences and psychology was because I saw a huge disconnect between, what people around me, right, fellow students knew about work and the realities of it all, which I saw my siblings really go through and cope with, which is that corporate culture, at least 5 years ago, was really, really tough. And I don't think it's changed as much, but it is changing. And I'm excited to be a part of that conversation. But I think that what really needs to change there is that people need more information and also confidence, empowerment, guidance in terms of how do you really evaluate places to work. I think one of the really great things that I personally experienced was doing trial periods. So, where you kind of come on for a few weeks and you see how you gel with the group, and also the employer can then see if you're the right fit and you're actually culturally, an ad, or if they maybe might not go in that direction. So I think that's one of the things that I'm excited to see more of is like people coming on as contract workers or for a trial period, and then being able to evaluate whether or not they really want to opt in full time.
And do you think that that would create more opportunities for both employers and candidates? Or do you think that the employers might be left really holding the bag, but they were hoping that that candidate was going to extend their stay. But meanwhile, the candidate is doing a trial run at maybe two companies in parallel and then says, yeah, I'm going to hedge my bets and I'm going to go here. Or doesn't it matter because the employee was probably going to leave anyway?
Yeah, I think I'm probably erring on the last point. And I will say that, if your culture is one that resonates with that person, then they're probably going to stick around. But if not, you want to try to capture like any data you really can and try to figure out, okay, and assess what kind of person was that? What were they looking for that we weren't able to really serve them? Also, something that I think about a lot actually is as this growing talent marketplace really develops, right? And people go to places like A Team where they're able to be contracted on for projects at larger companies and really join these communities of freelancers. Like, how are they received on the other end in that organization, right? Traditionally, people like designers and I'm trying to think of what other examples, but like designers, for example, are brought in, on a contract basis. I remember at several internships in my past that we've had designers on contract, and I remember them kind of being like a little bit separate from the team. And I always wondered, how do organizations approach that? How do they bring them in or not bring them in? I think traditionally they maybe those contract workers worked remotely. So it was kind of like, oh, out of sight, out of mind. But now that a lot of other people in organizations work remotely, some we have fully remote organizations, we realize that, oh, actually, maybe we do want to bring them in. Maybe we do want to embrace them as part of our culture. So I think that's really going to be an interesting place for me to just keep my eye on and really investigate, like, how are companies treating their contracted workers, and or their the ones that are kind of in and out.
I was honestly appalled at a Fortune 10 that I worked at for several years. Great company, really focused on its employees and professional development, all the good stuff. But when it came to contractors, A, they weren't allowed to eat in the lunchroom. B, they weren't invited to the town halls. C, they weren't allowed, and I use that word very deliberately, to participate in any of the after work programs, social gatherings, this kinds of things that were designed to create a community amongst the employees. And I always thought, ooh, how is that? And I'd start to befriend somebody I'd be working alongside with and say something like, oh, they're doing the barbecue, outside and that today. It'll be
Mhm.
great. Like, let's head down there and let's grab some lunch. And they'd say, no, 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 I'm a contractor. What do you mean? Well, I can't go. What?
Like, what is this, Jim Crow? Like,
What
why can't you
is?
be a part of the culture? I would think that you want to invite as many people in to see the culture as possible so that they can then be like, "Oh, like I did a contract role at this company and I loved it." And you know what? Maybe 3 years down the line, like I'll want to go work for them and I'll already have an established relationship and connections with people who worked there. And yeah, and the whole contract thing really never made sense to me, honestly, in terms of the culture. But I think as these sorts of positions and as companies need to adapt, and maybe hire more contractors, um, that might change. You never
Yeah,
know.
let's hope it does. And so on the flip side, then we were kind of talking about the employers and a bit about the consultants or contractors coming in. What do you think it is that employees, Gen Z in particular, given your purview and all of the experience that you have in that area, are really struggling with right now?
Yeah. So I'll say this from a perspective of someone who is a cultural investigator in her everyday life. I'm always trying to understand what the experiences are of the people around me, not for selfish reasons, but really because I care. And I think that that's honestly something that people are struggling with, is that it seems like their employers or their managers don't care. And or if they do care, they don't know how to express that, right? And it's little things in the day to day, right? For entry level people specifically, people being stuck on a project because their boss isn't responding to them. and having to wait for hours, sometimes even days, to get a
Mhm.
go ahead on something. And in the meantime, they have nothing to work on. So I think that's a really, really big struggle that isn't really being talked about. And also, on that note, how do you even have that conversation to say, hey,
Mhm.
like, I expect you to be responsive as my boss, or else I can't get things done. And I think that that's one thing. Another thing that people are struggling with is like being vocal and having the
Mhm.
psychological safety to provide feedback to their managers. Because, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but because most leaders aren't really trained on how to lead. I think the third one that I'll mention is really connection, and feeling, like you may be not connected to the team or to the work that you're doing, and therefore feeling stuck and feeling like, oh, I want to go work for another company or like see what's out there. But obviously, the grass is always greener. And,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people struggle with maybe evaluating other opportunities or feeling like they can't, they have these limits on themselves, like they can't interview for a job, and or it's interviewing is a dirty word. So I think like kind of self-limiting beliefs is another one that I think people are kind of struggling with.
And you're right about the grass is always greener. Look at how many people now are boomeranging, what they're calling it. They left their organization at some point last year. Okay, great. The whole COVID epiphany that people had and said, okay, I need to stay at home, I need better balance, or I need whatever it is that they need. Or even they went out to another company thinking, oh, it'll be a lot better. Many of them, I don't know what the numbers are, but I've been reading lots of anecdotal stuff, are going back to that original employer now and saying, I kind of made a mistake. I wish I didn't leave. Can I come back?
100%. Yeah. And I've seen it in firsthand in the like 30s, 40s generate, like the millennial and Gen X. I don't really care for the labels when it's not talking about my own generation, but I'll say like Gen Xers specifically, I've seen a lot of them boomerang. um, and I think I'll see some of the same. If I'm trying to read the future, like I think we'll probably see some of the same patterns with my generation, just because Gen Xers are really similar to us in their nature and how they go about their professional lives.
Well, X gave birth to Z in general, like from a generational standpoint. So you'd hope there'd be some connection, some
Maybe
parallels.
maybe a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And with all of the scouting that you do, I love that as a cultural investigator, Danielle. Can you talk to us about what you're seeing either at Cafe, where you're directing their marketing efforts, or at other organizations you're aware of? What are companies or maybe organizations, maybe they're nonprofits, doing that are really helping address these struggles that you pointed out that employees are experiencing right now?
Yeah. So I'll start with like internally what we're doing, even separate from the product that we sell. But I think that I'm going to Paris next Thursday, for to meet with my team, and to be there for 10 days. And we're a remote first company. We think of ourselves as a hybrid company because actually the team in Paris meets once a week, and I always get like kind of a follow up of what happened, and then we have a synchronous meeting amongst the all of us the next day. And so I think that, one of the things that is really helping, an initiative that I love, and I actually just tuned into Insider's Future of Work conference just before we got on the phone. And someone on the panel said, I think they were from Adobe, they said, remote doesn't mean disconnected. And I
Yes.
really love that, because remote shouldn't mean disconnected. Remote can mean that like myself, you go to Paris 4 times a year, and between you and me, like who doesn't love going, to Europe? So,
Sit on the
yeah,
Champs-Élysées, have a little bit of, bit of wine.
exactly. A baguette or two.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah, like it's great. But I think, the second thing is that really we do is like giving people more power over their work, empowering people to design their hybrid lives. And that's specifically something that I am a huge proponent of being able to, figure out, okay, based on the context and the information you have about what other people are doing, how they're working, you can make your own decisions about, okay, well, maybe I'll try this or that, or um, basically people, giving people the power to decide like what works for them in their lifestyle, because something that works for a parent, or something that works for, a Gen Zer who just graduated, like, might be wildly different. But also with this approach of, one size does not fit all. So I think something that's also really working for employers is in terms of just having the conversations with people that work at the company about like what works for them and what isn't working for them, and constantly revisiting and reassessing the hybrid or the remote or whatever your workplace strategy might be, because what works for, one 23-year-old might not work for another, and really trying to, build the experience for the end user, personalize the experience of hybrid, which I think that we're doing at Cafe, and helping companies do.
And we were just getting into the good stuff in conversation about how managers and how companies can do better by the Gen Z employees who are coming in and struggling with trying to figure out what they do, trying to ask for help, who to go to, all of that sense of connection. Because when they're remote, they feel disconnected, and then that leads to feeling like they have no purpose. And so how about you continue that wonderful collection of insights you are offering?
Okay, awesome. So I'll start with like internally, my experience. I came into a company that was operating from Paris, and I came in as like a remote first employee. But what that means is my home base is in New York, but I get to travel 4 times a year to go to Paris and be with my team and really have those social moments. So I think one thing, that I really loved, and I just got off of a insider event that talked about the future of work. And one person on the panel from Adobe said, remote doesn't have to mean disconnected. And that's certainly, my experience. And I'll also add that, I was on that same event, and Catherine Minshew from the Muse
Oh,
spoke about, which is a career platform for early career professionals. She spoke about the top 5 needs of job seekers, and they did a study on this. The top 3, I'll just say, were 1, work-life balance, 2, professional development, and 3, culture, people, and environment. So from what, I understand of that, I think that what companies can do is really tune in and give people more power, and really empower them with the right tools, um, and the right, I guess, strategies and norms, to live their best hybrid life. And that's what, at Cafe, that's really what we're trying to do, is not only build for the end user, right, where most HR tech tools are really built for, the HR admin, but we're really trying to build for the end user and give them a platform that encourages collaboration and socialization, and also gives them context for, what other people are doing, what events are happening nearby or at the office, so that they can make those informed decisions about where do they want to work, and based on what other people are doing. So, I think, building and giving people the right tools and knowledge to make the right decisions for them is the best thing that companies can do.
oh, and of course, I like that as, the founder of the Soft Skills Academy, where professional development and culture are important, because how do you build a good culture? Well, you have some good soft skills. So you're not creating a culture of toxicity where people are like, going after each other, and respecting the differences. And in fact, going beyond beyond respect into cohesion, right? And beyond inclusion, to really get there and build something where
Mhm.
people are relating to each other, as they should. So on that topic of soft skills, I'm going to ask you, Danielle, which soft skill do you wish people had more of?
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I went to college, I was kind of like, I don't really know what I want to do. And mind you, this is like 5, 6 years ago. So it's not that long ago. And I'm still a Gen Zer. So take it from me. I sort of was, very lost, and I kind of like looked around me, right? I started to identify, what were other people my age trying to do and why, and what did my older siblings do that maybe I would do differently, because we all learn from older siblings. And I realized that, the corporate culture of 5 years ago was not one that I wanted to go into. And it was certainly, I saw there was like a disconnect between the people around me like wanting this versus like what reality actually was, where I saw my siblings struggle. And I figured that if I could study social sciences with a psychology background, I could walk into any room, listen to understand people, and then bring that back to the boardroom where the decisions are made, and hopefully impact those decisions and therefore people's lives at scale, in a positive way. So I think that the moral of that story, and the reason I say it, is that key part is listening to understand, versus just kind of listening, or listening to say that you heard it, right? So I think that listening to understand and staying adaptable, are really, really two key pieces that I think that companies are really I wish that more people had, because Gen Z is the first fully digital aged generation to come into the workplace, and millennials, I think, also have this perspective, in also with Gen Z, is like the adoption of technology is so quick, and then we want to do things so fast that we kind of arrive and things aren't being done that way, and we're kind of just like, why? And we start to question it. So I think being adaptable, trying new things is a really, really big part of being an innovative organization that people actually want to work at.
And on the topic of speed, I'm curious what you think about this, because I've been polling a lot of Gen Zers and asking, how quickly do you think the interview process should be? You submit your job application and you expect to be hired by when?
I mean, if I could have it any way I wanted, I would say 3 hours later. Like, who says that there needs to be, a limit on like when you hear back? I mean, it's really crazy that the average time to hire is something like, what, 6 months?
Just under 6 now. It's gone up as of 2021. It added
Wow.
a month. Yeah,
Wow, that's terrible.
it is.
I'm confident that things will change. I came from the world of HR tech, and I'm still kind of in HR tech, but I came from the Wade and Wendy of the world, which was AI recruiting, and our mission was to get people hired faster. And the ideal number was like something like 6 days, right? Like from
Ooh.
6 months to 6 days. And I truly think that it will take a combined approach, right? Automation and human process, working together in order to make that happen. But you need to do it in a smart approach, right? And teach HR professionals how to adapt and how to use new tools, and also collectively with like employees and talent, and everyone has to kind of work together to make it better, which is very idealistic, but it's the truth.
It's okay to be Pollyanna, Danielle. This is, there's enough negativity out there. We can bring it up.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
And you made a comment that I did want to come back to when we were live until we weren't. And that was all about leadership, where you said leaders are not trained to lead, but they're increasingly being asked to do so. Want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, totally. So I'll start off with an example, right? So let's say you're working at a marketing agency, and maybe you work long hours. Maybe you're on the business development team, which I have been on, and maybe you work really hard, and you're a really good leader because you get things done. And then you hire a team and you get promoted, right? And now you're suddenly managing people. Well, usually your habits will translate into how you lead, right? So like if you worked 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, you expect people who work for you or work under you to do the same. And it's just not realistic. And so I think the disconnect there is that a lot of leaders, I think it's like 60% of people who lead are never actually trained on how to lead people. And, we have to approach leadership not with a webinar, right? Not with a skills session, right? But it has to be over time. It has to be something like what you're doing, Loralyn, which is you have to train people over time to lead different types of people, because that's what will happen. So I think that in terms of like soft skills, and I think the number one thing that I like to think about is try focusing, if you're a leader, on priorities focused leadership. I don't know if that's really a thing. I want to coin the term if it's not. But really this understanding, approaching leadership with the understanding that not all Gen Zers are the same. It's not a one size fits all if you're leading a young professional team, or if you're leading a team of, managers. Like every single person needs something different. And I think the great leaders actually see that and identify that in people and constantly make an effort to evaluate and assess, oh, how am I doing in terms of serving that person, their needs? Am I doing poorly? Do I need to spend more time with them? And really trying to focus on what are their priorities, because, what works for one 23-year-old, right, might not work for the next. And I'm writing a piece on that actually right now. It's like just explaining how different 23-year-olds can actually be.
And along those lines, I mean, this is how I really approach it, where I look at everybody as individuals, and especially in this era of side hustle, and everybody's got 8 different side hustles, and sort of no one single thing is the mainstream, right? And so I look at everybody not really as a team, but as a federation of individuals, because that's who's coming to the table. And if you look at that and say, you've got to find ways to create harmony, because discord doesn't solve anything. But if you can get that federation all working together towards the same goal, okay. I mean, we've done this with STEERus. Like we're making some magic happen. And it's not, here's the 10 employees and we all sit together, like you said, like in Paris, on the Champs-Élysées, like having our, little wine and our patisserie and just enjoying it all. It's not the way we do it. We're remote from all over the world, bits and pieces and, bobs of people, but we've come together under the same banner where we believe in the mission of making a difference and bringing equality to education and opportunity. So yeah, you just got to find the thing that unites the federation.
Yeah. And I'll say with that as a closing thought, like when I was in college and I was seeing my siblings struggle with their jobs, I was kind of like, well, aren't those organizations made up of people? Like, doesn't it matter at the end of the day? Like, even the most junior person, like, doesn't it matter how they feel and like, don't you care about their contribution? And so, I think that ultimately the CEO's job and senior leadership in general, their job is to really engage and ignite and spread the message all the way from the top across the organization, to really keep people engaged and keep on giving people what they want. And I'll say it's not easy. Like, I'm not pretending to know everything, but from an outsider's perspective, and someone who's been in HR tech for now almost 2 years, and from the perspective of a Gen Zer, right, who they're trying to hire, I'll say, like, you have to tune in, and also that the CEOs of pre-2020 are not all of them are well equipped to handle the CEO job of 2022. And I think it takes a lot of self work and looking within yourself, and also assessing and putting the time and energy into like investing in becoming a better person and a better leader in order to navigate this appropriately, and come out stronger the other end. And not only the leaders, but everyone else at the company will benefit.
That's right, because that's the whole thing, right? Everybody's got to gain something. The company, the individuals, the customers, or it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So you've given some very powerful messages there to leaders with a little, I'll say a subtle wink, wink, nudge, nudge, kick, kick, go do messaging there. And that's good, right? It's, we got to hear it. You say it respectfully, then, why not? Go for it. So I'm asking, what is the message you'd like to send to educators and trainers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say what people need now more than ever is support and guidance.
Mhm.
And we're all trying to work for organizations that align with our values in one way or another, whether you're, outspoken about it or not. You want to feel fulfilled by the work that you do. And it takes a lot of support and a lot of guidance. And for Gen Z specifically, we have had it rough. I have had it rough. I will say I graduated during the pandemic, missed out on an entire, almost semester of my last year of college, and went into work. And like, it was a really tough time. And I've navigated a toxic culture. I've navigated a fantastic culture. And I've also navigated, working remotely and managing a remote team. So from my experience, I would just say, like, we need guidance and we need support. And I think, the more that people reach out to us, the easier it becomes to ask for that, because we might not have, right, the network or the experience of being in the office to really help us give us that confidence that we need to reach out. We don't know the norms, right? So I think the more that people have empathy for that, and the more that people understand that, the easier it will become for us to accept help or ask for it at the very least.
Oh, bingo, bingo. That was where I was going to go at the end, that young people may not have the comfort to be able to ask, am I going to be fired because I'm asking for help? Or, how is it going to be perceived? And there's a whole bunch of things there that
100%.
everybody just needs to find empathy for each other. And maybe to your point, that leader has been put into that position. They're ill-equipped. They haven't had the opportunity. They're balancing maybe the kids at home, this, that, all kinds of other stuff, plus this whole new remote workforce and the pandemic and someone sick in the family. It's just, everybody's got everything going on, and we've got to arrive at the table understanding that we're not the only one, and just
Yeah.
find a way to meet in the middle, right?
Yeah.
You've got your stuff, I've got my stuff. How do we make it work?
Yeah. I think that empathy is really crucial, because, I'm even hearing, and this is typical, right? It happens in every generation coming to the workforce. It's like, oh, those dang millennials, oh, those dang Gen Z, they don't know what the heck they're doing. They don't know how to write a check. It's like, sorry, we grew up in a different time, and I'm I shouldn't have even said that. Like, I'm not even sorry. But having that empathy, and it goes both ways, right? I have my own biases that I work through and that I'm trying to be conscious of. I have to have more patience for my parents when they need help with technology. Like, I know. But yeah, I think it goes both ways. And I love that. I think what I'm trying to do with this book that I'm writing is help to fill those gaps, right? And identify them. Like, what are the gaps that are really keeping us from being in the right place for us? And what are the gaps in terms of leadership for Gen Z talent or for young professional talent that we can help fill? I'm sure that you're hitting some of those with what you're doing with STEERus, but yeah.
Absolutely. We're all a product of our time. And that's the thing. One of the
Mm.
journeys, we call them courses, same thing, planning programs, support programs, helping people not only recruit Gen Z, but manage them. Because you're a different beast, right? I'm X, I'm a different beast. And we've got to find the way, like what it is and how we're going to meet in the middle so that we can get stuff done. And
Yeah.
that's key. So with that, I've got one final question for you. I'm just going to have you fill in the blank. The world needs more.
Pausing.
Okay, I like that. It echoes back to, again, when we were live until we were not, that you had said just about really attentive listening and listening to learn, listening to understand.
Yeah. Pausing to do, like, even to do the work, which I've been doing for the past year, and it has changed my life. And I'm learning these skills of like doing the internal work at 23. Who knows where I'll be in 20 years.
In an amazing place, I'm sure, and I'm hopefully around to see it, because I think you have got tremendous insights and just all that what you're doing. I can't wait to read your book. I guess it'll be on, like I said, finding value-based job hunts, and then love the idea of the prioritization leadership style, or whatever it is you're going to call it. But we can't wait to see that book, and if you get it out soon, we'd love to feature it in our STEERus Academy.
Yeah.
All right. With that, thank you so much, Danielle Farage. Really appreciate you suffering through the technology issues with me and then meeting me back here to finish the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Loralyn. Talk soon.